Okay, so basically, many of us have been, if those for those who have studied art in a college, I think the history classes or the art history classes were always a thing that you want to avoid if you're not studying art history per se. So yeah, one second. Yeah, so getting straight down to it, while studying and practicing art, you really don't think about the writing part of it till opportunity arises, right? So articulation in words is very important. Those lectures which you've not attended or which you found boring do have something to offer. But in order for anyone to further a career, you will have to create some sort of documentation, whether it be in the form of proposals, artist statements, and in some instances also you need to write for grants. Now, nowadays, because of social media and online meetings like what we're having today, you are also game to doing presentations, correct? So I think this is something that we all at some stage have to get into, writing, whether you really are very fond of it or not. So nobody really knows your work better than you do. It's just a matter of putting those thoughts and those expressions into words, right? So I've jotted down a few do's and don'ts while writing on your art. Some of these are, little traps where we try to use very elaborate words, language, which not necessarily is required. So I'll just go through the points. Be simple, effective. Don't look for too elaborate words. Speak from the heart. No harm in taking a bit of help from the thesaurus when you're stuck on certain words. Try to convey the spirit of your work, right? And that will make your writing very authentic. We often say art for the sake of art, but do not want to elaborate our, sentiments. But unfortunately or fortunately, we do have to do that. And of course, always remember your artwork has your essence. So that should spill over into your writing. Okay. This is what an artist statement should not be. A manifesto, art history lecture, story about discovering art, etc. And all these which you can see. It's easier to decide how your statement should be by deciding what it should not be. This is the reason why I put up these points. So you know that you don't want to go in that direction. Another very important thing is that when you're writing, you have to know who you are writing for. If you're writing for a grant, if you're writing for your website, or if you're writing for probably a presentation for school children, the language is going to differ. So let's get to the first part, which is the artist statement. So what is an artist statement? An artist statement is a document basically that communicates your artistic vision, ideas, and techniques. To whom? To customers, sponsors, grant officials, galleries, friends, viewers of your shows. That could be, school children as well. And just about anyone who can help influence your career in a positive way. It is essential for establishing your identity as an artist and defining your place in the world of ceramic, in the ceramic art community. Sometimes it's hard to know how to write an art artist statement, but I just feel that if you go through previous artist statements initially, not just bang on when you're supposed to write, but it will give you a gist of how to go about it. So take time to look at artist statements of artists who you admire. If you are writing your particular statement for a specific purpose, such as having your work exhibited in a gallery or going to be featured in a magazine, then pay needs to the trends in the artist statement of people who have already published or who have already showed at this time in similar places. So artist statement is one. We'll go into the details of how you can kickstart it and how you refine it and all, but I'm just covering the other one is that why for a grant proposal. Again, as I will, there's some things I'm going to repeat because they do overlap. The audience and purpose. Okay. Think about the emotions and reactions you want your audience to come away with. That is the most important thing. You know, as artists, intent may have little bearings on audience's interpretation. You have an opportunity when you're writing to steer the viewers to your own intention, to make them see your work as you do. Yeah. So let's get down to how do you start. I'm sure this is the same dilemma as when you start a new body of work. But in writing, I think for me, it's much easier. Just remember for what and whom you are writing. It would be an ideal practice to write about each work or each body of work. As you know, practice makes perfect. So on the screen, your viewership is important. So you need to research your viewers. You need to understand the demands of the proposal. The guidelines are all, if you're writing for a grant, the guidelines are already mentioned. So you need to understand what that requirement is. And of course, check past successful iterations of a grant or a proposal. The plan, like in work, time is of essence. You need a structure and a format, and here are some of the requirements. So when I talk about plan, I don't mean just the structure or format of your writing. If it's a proposal or a grant, the format may already be indicated. But you need to allow yourself time to write, to rethink, and rewrite. Give yourself enough time. This allows you to come up with creative ideas and a lot of room to correct your mistakes before submitting anything. So you're going to need time not only for writing, but for taking photographs, for writing the draft, self-editing, if possible, getting somebody else to have a look at your draft, formatting. Each of these steps require a lot of time. So, begin as soon as you can. As integral as your words are, so are the visual aids. The power of the image. So your image and text, when in sync, will create the perfect narrative of your work. Choosing the right picture is important, and detailing in your work will also need, close-ups and some technical terminology. So you all are artists, you all must have already photographed several of your works, but sometimes it does help to get your work photographed by professionals where the details, the lights, the angles can be managed to give your work the best effect. Now the format. Okay, so your personal introduction, artistic vision, inspiration and emotions, and conclusion. Now the first three are sort of interchangeable, but when you want to really start on your first draft, I would suggest you go in this order because it makes it much easier. Your personal introduction would be your personal summary, the opening lines of your artist statement Should introduce yourself, you as a potter or a ceramic artist, and set the stage for the reader. Provide some context about your background, training, significant artistic influences that inform your work. Let them know what areas you focus on, such as the type of clay you specialize in, or whether you produce primarily sculpture or functional wear. This is where you get a chance to tell your story. Then, when we talk about artistic vision, it's a chance to delve into your creative process. This is where you can describe it um, in depth, explain how you approach your work, what inspires you, discuss your techniques, materials, and any unique approaches you have to your craft. Share the challenges you have faced and how you've overcome them. Now, that is also an interesting way to give insight to the artist persona that you. It will allow the reader to understand how you can overcome an obstacle and how you're not ready to just give up. Share your passion. When you share your work with others, it's easy for them to experience the final product. But it's not always so easy for them to see the passion and the ideas that went into the process of creation. Share those emotions, the experience that inspire you, and fuel your creative energy. Discuss also how your work reflects your values, beliefs, and how you hope to impact your audience. Now, that's really important for the reader to develop a connect with you. In conclusion, you summarize your artist statement with your artistic vision and goals. This will comprise of the conclusion. I hope I'm not going very fast, but I'm very scared of these words scaring everyone off. You must always let your audience know what you want them to feel about your work and what benefit for them will be when they experience your art. So, it's always when you look at a painting, you tend to look at the title first. It is a leeway that guides your eye, guides your mind to what the artist is trying to explain. Right? Now we come to the basics of writing. These are the same basics we teach young children when they have to write an essay or they have to write something on a certain topic in school. You have now a format, so you will be able to generate a couple of ideas. Now, the most basic questions that we see asked when we see anything is like what? Here you can talk about your medium, you can talk about the narrative, non-narrative, whatever goes into your work. The why, look at your own casual conversations that you've had with people about your work and incorporate that in it. You can talk about your inspirations, you can talk about your influences, you can talk about cultural context, all of that would come in the why. And the how, obviously, it's quite clear. It talks about the process which you use. How do you start? How do you progress? And how do you end? How do you select to work with your materials? All of these, so these three questions combined with the format, make it a relatively easy task. It's not very hard to do. Yeah. This is also something that when you're writing a grant or for a grant, applying for a grant, beg your pardon, or even in your own statement, it is necessary to write what makes your work so unique. Why is your work so important? Right? So, what imagery or ideas do you use in your artwork that is unique? How do you use the medium differently compared to other artists? So you have to develop, you have to come up with that your own USP. the USP of your work, and you need to narrate it and show that this makes your work totally unique. Yes. Why do you create the things you do? Now, to answer this question, the first thing you would have to do is question yourself about motives, what made you create the ideas. I'm not talking about what made you create your work. I'm talking, where did the ideas originate from? Where did those images come from? How did they find place in your work? This would go for anything, whether you are doing a hand built work, or whether it's a wheel work, or whether it's a sculptural piece. It'll work for everything. Why have you used the medium in this way? Why did you choose the meaning in your artwork? And what personal reasons do you have for choosing this work or working in this manner? And why have you addressed the subject or the medium the way you have? So these small questions are something that, even if you start out with a small mind map and you let it grow, you will come across so many points which you can write about. Most important is, of course, clarity of thought and words. As I mentioned in the beginning, it's not a very good idea to start off with elaborate language, which, disconnects you from your work or from your reader. All these questions which we have just talked, which I put up on the screen, right? All of these require a bit of introspection. You cannot write about your art without questioning yourself first. These questions, which you question yourself, will help you find the rationale behind your work. And believe me, this is also going to be a bit of an eye opener for you when you continue working. It's not that it's a different project when you introspect your own work, or when you look critically at your own work, or when you question yourself as an artist. That will give you a push forward, and it will make you think about how you can do things probably differently if you want to. Once you're able to note down the answers to all of these questions, you combine them, and voila, your artist statement is pretty much ready. So not to be missed are, of course, the details, where you talk about material, process, content, effect, cultural context, and the process. So simply enough, like, what is the medium? What is unique? Is it interesting, challenging? Where does it come from? Why have you chosen this specific medium? Will this medium change over a period of time? Have you used it with that aspect that you want to see how it works later on? So is there a cultural or historical context for the material also? That is also something that you can, indulge the thought process. Then you have process. So when I talk about process, it's not when I'm saying that from the moment you put your hand to clay. It is from where does the idea germinate from? Where does it come from? Where's so you can start from imagination to conceiving, measuring, molding, folding, building, combining, scratching the surface. All of that would be the initial part of your process, which takes you forward to your final work. So these are things that you can incorporate while writing, because often you say, okay, you've given me 5 questions, I'll answer them in 2 lines each and I'm done. But that is not it. There are so many aspects which you can, speak more or write more on. Content, is there a story in the work? If not a story, is there an argument, a question, a message, a representation? Any of these things work. Does your work have multiple meanings? or does it have multiple function? Effect, is your work what you wanted it to be? Do you have any verbs like associated with your work? For example, does your work float? Does it emerge? Those are type of the words you can use when you are writing about it. Cultural context means how do we contextualize this work? How do we relate this work in culture? It could be in social culture. It could be in your social surroundings also. So what histories or what customs or what movements or what attitudes have connect with your work? And when I say opposites, it's interesting. I mean that in what ways does the work resist, contradict certain ideas? That's also something that can be written about. What do you absolutely not want this work to be? That is also another valid point. So it's a general practice. It's an easy practice rather, that you just sit with a blank page and then you start, look at your work, observe it, and start jotting down the adjectives that come to your mind, whether it's related to any of the previous points, the appearances, the characteristics, anything. That's a very good, starting point, just to start with words. You can use adjectives like vivid, dramatic, aesthetic, aggressive, stark, intense, bold, two-dimensional. There's a whole long list. But as I said, that it would help for you to go through other artist statements or read about other artworks. It doesn't necessarily have to be artist statements. Anything on it, any writing on artworks will give you exposure to a whole different set of words and language. The adjectives you use should fit your artwork style and theme. It should be on point. Then comes the first draft. So you've pretty much got all the tools in your bag now for making a comprehensive statement, proposal, grant, presentation. So the first draft doesn't require you to have it absolutely structured. Like a mind map, just write is whatever comes to mind. Even the most experienced writers need to go through the process of editing. So when you start writing, don't write and cancel and just let everything come out. Then when you go further for the next draft, you can pick and choose and eliminate stuff then. Be specific. Use technical terminology also. If your art follows footsteps of, say, minimalism, you can describe your work as, minimalistic or quiet, rhythmic. So these are the type of words also that you can incorporate while writing your work, but don't let an unsuccessful first draft daunt you. The first draft is putting everything on paper. Okay, so I've just taken 2 examples because I thought that for 16 slides, 17 slides is just words. Let's break the monotony. So I've chosen these 2 works of a Japanese artist, Harumi Nakashima. And I'm going to give you read a bit of what has been written about this artist's work, just to give you an idea. So the artist creates freeform ceramic sculptures that feature organic, yet psychedelic characteristics, talking about the characteristics, about the form. Nakashima, mostly known for beautiful structured or geometric shapes embellished with iconic polka dots, works with a level of intricacy that demonstrates the artist's attention to detail. Of course, I am reading something that is written by a second person who is reviewing the work. So it's going to be much different from your own statement, but it will give you a sense of how the flow of description works. The artist creates free-form ceramics that feature organic characteristics. However, artists like him have thrived tremendously by incorporating Sodesha references into their current pieces. So, this is the cultural context. A contemporary aesthetic and subtle, refined references to traditional Japanese pottery allow the works to be perceived aesthetically rather than functionally. So, this is where your cultural context also comes into play. Yes, of course, improve on the draft. Another reason to begin the process early is that you get time to get a second opinion. Even when I write, I will write a first draft. I will make the corrections, the edits, and leave it. I'll leave it for a day, and then I'll go back to it with a fresh mind, because there's only a certain amount of time you can put in writing when you're an practicing artist. So I normally write. Even as a writer, this is a practice I follow. I write, edit, and then leave it, and then go back to it the next day, where you are able to pick out the mistakes much easier. And of course, great writing is always a product of great editing. Yeah, so this is, I'll just give you a minute. This is an artist statement of an American artist, Ian Hazard Bill, and I've put out his statement. He has used, I have put in the bullets, but the paragraphs are the same way as it is in his website. Okay, so if you go through each paragraph, you'll see how, now that you know the format, you know the terms, you would be able to sort of say that, okay, he's talking about his process, he's talking about the medium, he's talking about his uniqueness, he's talking about where he's coming from. So I'll just give you a minute to have a look at this. I particularly like the conclusion, if I may call it so, where he talks about that pots are sculptural celebrations. I think that's a very interesting way of putting words and making meaning of it as well. So I think it's very simple, yet very intense, if you read the entire statement. I'm going to go on to show you. Now, of course, artists have their own websites, and they have different categories. And this is a writing on for the collection of vases that he has made. So he goes again into the description, not only the description, but also the feelings that he has while describing a single object, a single art piece. So give you a minute for that. Let's have a look. Okay, moving on. we're coming to pretty much the last slide of this presentation. We're talking about grant proposals. So in the brief that they provide, we do understand what do they want to fund, what do you want to do that they want to fund, and why are you the person to do this? Now, if you cannot get the answers to the first three, then adding the fourth answer, why is now the time, will definitely add leverage to your proposal. There are some additional tips I'd like to share when you're writing a grant application. That you should vary your content and language according to the context of the grant. An application to a school board will definitely be very different than to a political driven grant program. So you have to be very aware about who you are writing for, who your reader is, who your audience is, as when we talked about the artist statement. The most important component of any grant application is the presentation of visual and other materials documenting your previously completed works. So that also is very important. So that's so in a grant application, you're practically incorporating an artist statement, of course, of your earlier works. Images will ensure that images should be taken from different angles, because if your presentation is video, that is all right, but if not, you have to give the most all the entire in image, which will give the entire dimension and feeling and weight of the book. Emphasis should always be put on your most recent work. If your proposal, for example, includes a departure, if it demands you to do something that you are not doing, then you need to explain why this proposal, why this, you are the person for this, who deserves this grant, and why you are ready to move away from your work to create something new. There should be a clear relation, of course, I'm repeating myself again, between the visual support material and the written proposal. That's very, very important. Keep the written material short and precise, as jurors may be looking through hundreds of proposals, but keep it effective. Let it stand out and strike. One last tip is that it's a good idea, if act as if the proposal is like you're having a telephone conversation with the jurors. Anticipate which questions may come up and explain yourself in a comfortable manner. So, you are now on both sides of the table. You are the person who wants the grant, and you are the person who's giving the grant. I think if you look at things at at your work in different perspective, you will be able to write more effectively. So that is the end of my presentation. And I hope it was not too long, didn't have too many words in it. I would have loved to do something in person where, we could have discussed things and had examples, talked about your own works, but probably someday that will happen. I hope it's been helpful also. I'm very, very grateful to the Indian Ceramic Art Foundation for giving me this opportunity to talk to so many of you. Unfortunately, it was a one-sided one. But if anyone has any questions or anything, I'd be very happy to answer them.
Hello, this is Sandhya. Yeah. It was a great presentation, very useful.
I hope so.
I have a question about what would you suggest the size of an artist statement? What is a good?
See, an artist, it would, of course, depend on where you're going to use that artist statement. For example, if you're using it as like a resume, then you're going to have a lot of more factual details as well as your statement about your work, right? But if you're going to have something where it is, say, on your website, then it can be very concise.
Okay.
So it does depend on that.
Okay. And typically, is it a good practice to have it in first person in terms of tense?
I think so.
Okay.
I think, but like when we write, we don't need to use the word I a lot. Remember, when you're writing, it's not about you, it's about your work.
Okay.
So never get confused in that. We are talking, and I did share a review of an artist. We have to be a little bit, we are not allowed to be vain when we write. So we have to be a bit humble. But as I said that, it is about your work.
Okay. Yes, that
but
makes
it
sense.
has to, of course, carry your essence. Why your passion?
Yes.
Your passion should be seen in your writing as well.
Okay. Thank you. That was very useful.
I'm glad. You're most welcome.
Any more questions? We might plan with one workshop with Arati, maybe offline workshop or some online. So we will update you about that also.
Yeah, and I hope I haven't bored everyone with so many images of words when you're normally used to looking at visuals.
This presentation was everything was about words, no? Because
it was, but literally I had to do that. Yeah.
Thank you, Arti. It was really nice, very informative.
You're most welcome. I'm glad I hope you can take something and use it in your writing. And I would suggest that, along with your work, just have a notebook and scribble every day, whatever comes to your mind when you're writing, when you're working. And that you can always go back to that later on, to when you need to actually sit and write, you'll already have your groundwork done for you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
You're welcome. Pleasure.
Yeah. Okay, so there are not any questions. So, okay. Thank you, Arti.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure. I'm looking forward to interact in some manner more with you all.
Yes. If I get any question, I will forward it to you.
Yeah, I'll be very happy to. I'll be very happy to.
Insta and email to.
Yeah, please do. It'll be a pleasure. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Thanks for joining, everyone.